Hello, Commission. We're going to go through the brief on growing our local economy.
Okay.
So why is economic development so important? Well, economics important because it provides high-quality, sustainable, actually, let me move this a little bit closer. Sorry. It provides high-quality, sustainable employment for the citizens and not only provides for their daily needs and long-term goals, but also provides government with revenue to sustain needed public services so all citizens can enjoy a high quality of life. Current trends, national trends, the American Planning Association has identified many national trends potentially affecting Carroll's future economic growth, which include surging post-pandemic entrepreneurship, increases in e-commerce leading to a growing number of distribution and fulfillment centers, and a reduction of brick-and-mortar stores. Also tech hubs and reshoring of manufacturing jobs along with the mobile factory movement. These national trends, along with the Economic Development and Land Use Study, can help frame the context in which the forthcoming master plan considers economic development. So just to give a brief background, commercial and industrial uses, as I'm sure you are all aware, and probably many watching, commercial and industrial uses provide more revenue to the county than residential uses. That in fact, residential uses, in fact, cost the county more than they contribute. The 2014 Carroll County Master Plan cited increasing the amount of land designated for commercial and industrial uses, which has been fulfilled. However, the goal that was stated of 15 to 18% of commercial industrial land uses within the designated growth areas has not. Research, however, still needs to be conducted as to whether increased amounts of economic development land correspond to area with adequate transportation, site location, and water and sewer infrastructure necessary to attract economic investment. Also, Carroll County has a larger total percentage of land zoned agricultural, conservation, and residential combined than surrounding counties, and less land zoned for other uses. This can greatly affect economic development, growth potential if land is unavailable for such uses. The Economic Development and Land Use Study mentioned the top 5 industry sectors in Carroll County are retail trade, other services excluding public administration, and the last 3 I just wanted to highlight because I will be talking about those very shortly. But construction, healthcare and social assistance, and professional scientific technical services. Now, key industry sectors that were identified in the Economic Development and Land Use Study as being currently strong as well as having good growth potential includes construction, healthcare and social assistance, and professional scientific and technical service industry. These industries can benefit Carroll County economically, balancing both currently established industry and regional growth sectors. Also to note, which I thought was very interesting, and as probably many of you saw in the Economic Development and Land Use Study last year, that 41% of workers are eligible, 41% of workers in Carroll County are eligible to telework, which is important since increased spending occurs closer to home for remote workers, resulting, and if everybody that could work at home was able to, that would result in an estimated 36,000 367 people that could increase their spending in this county. The study also identified the top sites for economic development in the county, which included, as the top 5 would be, Pankland LLC, Avondale Road, Town Mall of Westminster, the John Frock site, and the Beatty property. The study mentions the top 3 targeted industry sectors identified for economic growth as hospitality and agritourism, manufacturing, and small business incubation. These industry sectors mirror national trends identified by the American Planning Association that was noted previously, earlier in my presentation. Additionally, growth scenarios were discerned off feedback from stakeholders, including the public, which reflected a level of growth intensity the county could pursue. Most feedback indicated a growth scenario out of 4, A, B, C, and D, of growth scenario C, which is 350 to 550,000 average annual commercial absorption in square feet, a 0.8 to 1.2%, or approximately 1,360 to 2,000 residential growth population per year, moderately significant changes to existing future land use categories within the municipal growth areas or designated growth areas, future expansion of the existing municipal growth areas and designated growth areas boundaries would be likely. All municipal growth areas and designated growth areas will need to be priorities for increasing infrastructure capacity, and the relationship of expenditures to revenue will rise at a more balanced rate, lending towards a low deficit or balanced budget. And lastly, what is the relevance to Carroll County? Putting all this information together just for a really quick brief. So with some just parting thoughts for relevance, the county may decide how much investment it would like to see in tech hubs and investigate how it may be positioned to take advantage of the Baltimore Tech Hub for predictive healthcare. Remember that healthcare and social assistance is the largest industry in Carroll County. Also, how much land would the county like to allocate to the retail industry, while making sure there are appropriately zoned, well-sited properties that can accommodate the rise of distribution centers? Agritourism may also benefit at the many farms in the county by providing extra income, and also provide opportunities for residents and tourists alike to experience Carroll's agricultural heritage firsthand. And last, but certainly not least, and I would say most importantly, discussions may be forthcoming about implications for the reduction, increase, or no change scenarios of land allocation for commercial and industrial land uses, considering how they affect the economic, equitable, and environmental stability of the county. Mr. Chair, that is all I have. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. So I was reading through, preparing for this evening, and one of the, I hate to call it buzzword, but one of the trends, phrases, tech hubs.
Yeah, thank you.
How is that defined? What is a tech hub? It's not a data center, is it?
No. No, it's not the same thing. No.
Tom got it.
Is it like incubation space? What is it?
I
Yeah.
think to get the best answer for you, I will go back and look at the information from APA, and I can get the exact definition for you instead of me trying to remember it and potentially give you a wrong definition. I just think because it's so specific of a definition. I just want to make sure I get you the actual actual information for that.
That'd be great.
And right below that, again, if you go back to the, I think it was the second slide in the
Second slide,
presentation, there was a, distribution for reduction. Nope, next, I'm sorry, next slide. I don't know where it was. Okay, mobile manufacturing movement? What is that?
So they talked about,
Yeah, mobile
From-
factory movement, I'm sorry.
From what I-
Mobile factory movement.
from what I can remember reading this, and once again, I can go back and get you more information, but it was almost as trying to put what I remember into words. Sorry. You could almost have, I don't want to call it a maker space because that's totally different, like we have here in Westminster, but goods could be manufactured closer to consumers. That is, I guess, the best recollection I have of that right now in my head. But once again, I can get you that information.
Probably like 3D printing, that kind
Oh,
of stuff. I mean,
Could be.
yeah, because they keep claiming they're gonna make car parts 3D printed.
3D printed stuff, okay.
So they claim,
3D printed
whatever.
homes.
And then there was another slide, if you could go to the next slide, over there on the right, where we talk about compared to our peers. Whenever I see that word peers, what are we calling what counties are we trying to benchmark against?
That is a good question. So when we originally started this study back, I guess, 2 years ago, meaning we, at the time, it was Linda Eisenberg, Paige Sunderland, myself, and I cannot remember who else, but we mentioned peer counties being, for instance, Baltimore County, Frederick County, Harford County. It may have also been York County in Pennsylvania. I do not think Howard County was one that we said was a peer. Yeah, I think it was just those counties.
Well, the reason and it's not a quiz, but at the same time, I think it would be interesting if you were to ask the commissioners, who do we want to benchmark against? And you were to ask us individually, who do we want to benchmark against? I guarantee you, most of us would not mention Baltimore County. And that's not because we have anything against Baltimore County. It's just, we're more agrarian. I mean, what's realistic in terms of, of our growth, in terms of what's possible, in terms of just, the amount of, when we start talking about distribution centers, I'm still an owner in 1.5 million square feet of distribution space in Atlanta, Georgia. And I gotta tell you, I mean, we didn't build those things unless we had easy access to an interstate or even rail. Believe it, and so, we are starving for that interstate access. So when you start talking about absorption and this, that's the life that I live in, to some degree on that stuff. So, again, when we start talking about benchmarks, I would, there's a benchmark, I think, in terms of proximity. It's just natural for us to keep an eye on, what does Howard County pay their teachers? What does Baltimore County pay their teachers? We need to know, because that's to some degree who we're competing against. In terms of who we aspire to be like, I really would like for us to say out loud, this is who we want to be like. We aspire to be, we think they're doing it right. Who is that? Let's duplicate what they're doing, because again, I'm saying too much here, but I like Frederick. I think Frederick is a great town. I love to go to eat there. I think if you were to poll us again, do we want to be like Frederick from a growth standpoint? I think you'd get a mixed group of messages up here. There's certain things about Frederick we like, right? We wish we had some of the problems, but frankly, there are a lot of those problems we're glad we don't have.
Well, we can't even begin to compare with Frederick.
No, we can't.
Because it's all about roads and access, and there's our uniqueness. Whether you want to say it's a good thing or a bad thing, I'll argue any day it's a good thing.
It's an attribute that we have to deal with.
And,
anyway.
so, you know, and I'm not sure we can benchmark ourselves with any of the others that you're talking about because of the road situation.
Exactly.
There's no county that you mentioned, is equal to Carroll because of the access to the area. So I think we have to be a little unique on what we're looking for. You know, the tech center might be it, because maybe that doesn't take a whole bunch of trucks to come running in and out of the county. You know, maybe they're you know, we gotta define this down.
Yeah.
And say, we can't have the data center, or we can't have the distribution center, or we can't have, but what can we have that makes sense for the future for us? And without ruining a road from 795 beside 140 all the way up through to God knows where. So there's the uniqueness that we're looking for. I don't see any county that you mentioned we can benchmark ourselves against, other than maybe Adams. And that could be the closest thing if you're gonna benchmark as far as Carroll. So, I mean, that's kind of my answer to that one. And the other thing, while I have the floor, if you don't mind, would you go back to the slide where you talked about Avondale and the different, right there? I want to ask you, are all those sites that you're referring to there, are they all zoned for commercial industrial at this point? Are they like zone ready or not?
I would have to go back and triple check that, because
Just-
one of the things, that, if I may, when they went and when they, meaning the consultant, WGI, they went and reviewed for each of the sites, and these were the top 5 listed, and they had different criteria that they used to choose those: access, water and sewer availability, designated growth areas. So I would assume that they are, but I don't want to assume. I would like to double check.
Because there are a couple there that I would say it would take a real stretch to make it happen. One of them is that Avondale site where you have a slope that's about like that. So is that, you know, is that something that's really something we need to look at, or should we just check that off and say, ain't gonna happen unless you build it on stilts on one end of it, or move millions of cubic tons of dirt?
Yeah.
So, and then that leads to the next question, and I hope I'm doing this appropriately for you, but, the 31 corridor, so you have Avondale that's out there, and I know where you're talking about, it's a specific farm that's right along the railroad tracks there. But as you roll out, you have the quarry on one side, you have the 31 Avondale corridor that rolls into New Windsor with some breaks in it. So you have housing out to, say, Avondale. And then you have 2 sides of the corridor there that's zoned commercial industrial till you get to some farmland. And there's a fair amount of open space there, and which could be utilized for something like this. And then there's some glitches in that too, sinkholes. So, you know, as we're looking, so then that leads me to one more question, or 2 more. One is the county-owned land that's in Mount Airy. I keep referring to that and going back to it. When and if is there ever going to be a decision made on that? Is it going to be there for future schools, or is it for something like this? I mean, that's a lot of good dirt there. that could
I'm
be
sorry, where's this,
utilized.
please, Ralph? Where?
The Leashar property.
Harrison last year.
Glacier.
Thank you.
Yeah, right at Mount Airy,
27.
which is the closest we have to an interstate.
Yes, it is.
So, should we be looking at that? One final question, and then I'll get out of your hair. The percentage of land that's been utilized in the air park out here, is it, how close to total build out at the air park? Because that, to me, has been quite a success. It's taken a lot of time, but it's been good growth.
Been
and good
steady.
jobs. So where are we with that?
And with that, I don't know the specifics. That would be more of a question for economic development, and I can certainly
That's
get in
fine.
touch with them. And then for the Harrison LaShire property, I'm not specific with, I'm not as up to date as maybe economic development with the question that you had down in
Well,
Mount
we'll
Airy.
bank those questions in,
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
understand that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I just want everybody to know that I'm at the age, if I don't ask the question now, I may never get to it.
And if I could just make a mention, we had asked if folks from Economic Development could join us tonight. They were not available, but we will have them come back at one of the very next couple of meetings, depending on their availability.
Okay, I'm just, and the other, well, I'm gonna leave it. I'll ask that when economic development shows up.
And if I may, just, and it sort of you hinted on this, when I mentioned benchmark counties, as you all probably remember, one of the counties that we did not include as a benchmark, but was mentioned in the economic development and land use study was, which you mentioned, Adams County. But that was not what we originally, from what I remember, from what I recall, envisioned as a benchmark county. And, I mean, I don't want to speculate or anything, but just with Adams County, I mean, you do have US 15 running through it. So to your point about connectivity with highways. So, but I made a note of your questions, and I will get back in touch with you.
Okay, thank you.
I
Not a
think a lot of
problem.
it boils down to what works for the different areas of the county. 'Cause
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Ponytown has a couple really good businesses up there. They're kind of close to 15.
Yeah.
They have pretty decent roads that go 4 ways out of town, pretty much.
And it's flat land up there.
And it's, yeah, it's easy to build,
That
for
means
sure.
a lot.
But I guess one of the interesting, and this is maybe the most interesting thing to us as a group on this slide, you know, when we start talking about top growth scenario, because we've been mulling, I've brought this up a couple of times. What is, if we were to target and say out loud, we think this is healthy growth. So 350,000 to 550,000 of annual commercial space absorption a year. That's kind of a target. And then that, you know, let's call it 1% growth per year in residential units. I've never seen numbers like that. And so this is important to us, because I think we ought to, at the end of the year, and part of our planning process, right, when we update our plan, is to say, okay, did we hit this? Are we ahead or are we behind? Did we make it too hard for people to get stuff done? I mean, what you know, what are we doing? And so I think it's really important to say, okay, if these are our goals, you know, how do we do this and manage it properly so that we're not getting out over our skis? So I think it's great to put stuff like that up. Whether we agree, you know, we can debate, and I think the commissioners should tell us. Let's have an affirmation. Are those the numbers that we kind of want to keep an eye on and say, at the end of the year, did we allow this or help this happen? You know, I think it's important for us to have that.
I agree. I kind of think of it from another angle, another perspective, you know, given budget, revenue shortfalls, deficits, forecasted deficits because of economic pressures, expense pressures. How do we you know, expand revenues to meet those demands? And are these the numbers
That make it happen.
that make that happen?
Exactly.
Or is it more commercial that has to be in the mix? Because we all know we're short on commercial, and it generates more to the bottom line.
Yep.
Is that something that needs to be addressed more thoroughly and land use looked at in the commercial areas or potential commercial areas? So I kind of come at it from that and say, okay, here's the nut we gotta to make. How do we make it? Instead of saying, well, you know, it's scenario C and it's 1,300 to 2,000 residents. I don't know what that generates in revenue compared to what
No, it's
the
a-
budget is.
No, it's
I
a
have no idea.
legitimately fair question. I agree with you. I mean,
I just think we need to come at it from that perspective, or else we're always gonna be chasing our tail. look, I'm not saying we shouldn't be, have responsible growth and managed growth, and I
All true. All true.
completely get it.
All true.
But you have to do it with the goal in mind,
That's right.
so that the citizenry isn't gonna get whacked with increased taxes every few years, increased assessments and all that kind of stuff. And then we're just constantly spinning. I think we need to have a number from the budget side that says, here it is, here's what the number is gonna be, here's what the revenues need to be in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, and then build the plan to fill that number so that we're economically healthy and growth smart.
Well, and the obvious thing we all know sitting up here, some folks at home might not be aware of, but obviously if we're talking about looking at, municipal growth areas and the designated growth areas, just look at the municipal for a second. And of course, it's very basic to us. But any of those properties that are currently within county that then get absorbed into the municipality, whether it be a homeowner or it be some kind of commercial business, be it a shopping center or whatever, they're gonna see increase in their tax base, which is then gonna be carried down to the individual businesses leasing from, say, a shopping center. So then that's gonna be trickled down to other parties, so that's gonna create some potential hardship. Not that that doesn't happen on a basis, but, to me, we've gotta be looking, scenario C doesn't tell me enough. I mean, I like the fact that they've got some percentages there, but it really doesn't tell me enough
There's
of,
more behind it.
yes.
Absolutely.
And just real quick, if I might, can you go back to starting with the second slide? Before I get to this, let me just mention this to everybody. So everybody was saying, what's a tech hub? It's a geographical location where there's a concentration of technologically related businesses and startups, along with supporting infrastructure and talent pool. Idea for placement, development, and streamlining. Now, my question, and I'm not against something like this, and I'm not trying to be exceptionally negative about this, but I have a realistic expectation of this, which is one thing. Where in Carroll County right now would we have a tech hub? Because when you think of tech hubs, what do you think of? You think of Seattle, you think of certain other areas, the DC corridor. Do we have the type
270.
of, yes, do we have the type of facilities and locations, one, but more importantly, do we have the amenities and the availability that would make, business owner X want to move here?
That's right.
And bring his 20 and 30-year-old employees to Carroll County? I'm not being negative to Carroll County, but does that fit within the mix? Because, yes, we have great schools, we all know that, but they're looking for a certain type of lifestyle, be it restaurants, be it other things that they want to do. I would seriously question if we have that. So I'm not really, that kind of threw me when I saw that, because there's been conversations several years back with the city of Westminster talking about, there was a concept that was kind of displayed before them about being a tech hub. And I'm not against it. I just don't know anybody that I know in tech that would say, I'm moving to Carroll County.
Yeah, in fact, we know of one company that moved out for this
Exactly.
reason. So,
Exactly.
again, I think this is all great because, and I totally agree with you, because it's not one thing.
No.
It's everything. It really is. It's everything that you just mentioned. It's education, are the families gonna be able to educate their kids? Can they find the homes that they want at the price that they think they can afford? Are people gonna show up to work? I mean, I had a really interesting conversation with a guy on a plane the other night, coming back from the middle of nowhere. Anyway, I won't get into it, but it was just fascinating. Afterwards we can talk about it. So, this kind of stuff is, I love this stuff, but again, it's an aspiration. And when you say a $500,000 square feet of commercial absorption a year, that doesn't sound like much. But when you say, okay, it's $1.5 million over 3, that's a number, guys.
No, it is.
That is a number. And I'd like to know if we've ever hit it. Otherwise it's just a number on a piece of paper. I mean, it's a hope. It's not even something we can achieve. So, yeah, it's all good.
Do we
We have a lot to
know,
look forward to then when an economic development shows up,
Yeah.
because they can give us those.
do we know by chance, reason I want to go back to this slide, do we know by chance, it says second lowest, do we know who the lowest is?
Yes, that is in my spreadsheet.
Okay.
I can get that for you.
Okay.
Sorry,
No,
Commissioner.
no, it's fine.
It is-
I just was curious as to who it was, because to me, I'd like to be able to visualize what area that is for comparison.
Yeah.
And then if you could go to the next slide, I think it was the next one. Let me see. Let's see, was it this? So you have here, it says 41% of workers are eligible to telework. Interesting statistic. I'm curious how they pulled that together, because based off of what data do we have that? I mean, it sounds good, and we know that teleworking has been on an uptick, but we also know if anybody's been watching the news the last year,
Tell me about
most of
that.
these companies are telling you to get back in the office, especially the tech companies. So I'm just kind of intrigued by this, because I know a variety of people that do telework in Carroll County, but they've teleworked pre-COVID. So, you know, conceptually, it's an interesting thought, but I don't know where they obtained that information to give us that hope of additional, you know,
Dollars
economic
spent.
dollars being spent.
Yeah, who makes
Yeah, I
them,
mean,
who makes them eligible?
I don't know. That's why
What
I'd like
makes
to
them
know what,
eligible?
I'd like to know what the details are
Yeah,
on
we're
that.
doing, we've got 65 people in my company, and we're doing everything we can to try to get everybody back in the
Sure.
office, because we're just, yeah.
Yeah.
We gotta have people, to just execute our business plan.
Yeah.
So, question,
This is good stuff, thank you.
No, it's all good stuff, but yeah.
question I would have is, when we look at what Carroll County is, what kind of jobs do we export out of Carroll County? Where does everybody go to work, and what kind of work do they do? And really, why we don't have a tech hub is because, number one, our zoning doesn't allow for any larger buildings height-wise, and that's what everyone thinks of. And, you know, Carroll County's come a long ways in the 50 years I've been alive. I mean, Westminster, I always figure, is about 15 to 20 years behind Frederick. I don't think we're ever going to get the kind of commercial base they do, just because of the road system. But, you know, as a city, it's gotten a lot better. But, you know, a lot of those amenities we don't have because there's really not enough demand for it.
Sure.
Because of the local citizens don't call for high-end restaurants and stuff like that. They would rather go to an agritourism or a chain restaurant, God forbid, you know. But,
Where it all tastes the same.
Could we then go to the next slide real quick?
but I guess, once again, that's economic.
I do think when we're looking at these industries, the top three, it mentions hospitality. I mean, the one thing I think I'd be hard pressed to find anybody in Carroll County that doesn't agree on, we have a serious lack of hotels. I was just having this conversation the other day with somebody. You know, I'll just take my alma mater. I went to Western Maryland, now McDaniel College. And every time they have either the new students coming in, or, you know, it's parents' weekend, or the alumni come back for, you know, alumni weekend, my question is, where do they stay?
Stay 20 miles away.
Exactly. You're either, and this is not a negative towards anyone, they're either in Tawnytown and Antrim, some people, or you're in Hunt Valley or Owings Mills, because there's not enough with the only other hotel we have up here that's a decent hotel. So to me, that's one of our biggest challenges. And the other one, which we've all experienced in some fashion, we don't have enough good locations countywide for events. You think of all the events we've had. You lost Martin's, that's now closed. So where do you host a big event in Carroll County? Because, you know, at least even when the hospital had their event at St. Martin's, they were putting a giant tent on the outside of the building to enclose that. We don't have that. And those are things that the community does want and they use viably. So, I mean, I think hospitality is dead on for that part, and I think, you know, manufacturing and small business is definitely right on as well.
Where I'm going this coming weekend is down in Cambridge. You look at the resort down there, that,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's the problem. We don't have anything,
No,
not even close to
The
that.
destinations more so than Cambridge itself, so.
Yeah.
Great food for thought. You probably thought you'd be 2 minutes in and out. Sorry.
I love
I
it.
love this stuff, and and again, I think it's,
I
I think
appreciate
it's
it.
great to drill down on it. But if nothing else, it helps, I think it helps us at least have the conversation around what do we think is healthy growth? You know, what do we want to be when we grow up? Because if nothing else, the regulations ought to aspire to that too. So, thanks, appreciate it.
And thank you, and if I may, I would be remiss, I do not want to forget this slide, but I think there's a lot of great information that you all discussed, and we can fill these in, but are there any other things that you would like to add to? What information stood out to you? What could we continue to get, what could we continue to get more information on as we go through the master plan process? And are there any tentative recommendations that we could put in a parking lot for future consideration?
I think the obvious one, and I'm sure a few people up here are thinking it, we're looking at the municipalities and we're talking about designated growth. Well, if I'm not mistaken, it was the last meeting we talked about having conversation with the municipalities. If we don't know where they're headed, and of course, the challenges we all know, and sometimes I'm not sure the public is completely aware of the process, you know, you may have a different council or mayor in that municipality X number of years out. So whatever they may deem as the potential plan could be amended or completely shifted based off that. But I think it'd be ideal to get them in here and have those conversations sooner than later, because I think the challenge is how else can we get a feel for what their thoughts are?
And again, it's gonna vary from city to city.
It is. But at least have knowledge and be somewhat on
Yes.
a similar page or projection.
Several are doing the master plan too now,
Yes.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we do have on our list of upcoming meetings, opportunities to bring the municipalities in. We're looking at inviting their planning commission chair and one of their staff people to give kind of an overview. Of course, we have a lot of municipalities and not a lot of meetings, so we have to sort of pace these things out. I know there's a lot of information that we want to get, a lot of conversations that we want to have. That's why we're trying to kind of chip away at this each meeting and try to get things on the calendar so that we can have these discussions, but,
And Daphne, if I might make a suggestion, and we mentioned this at the last meeting, there are only designated municipalities that really have a stake in the game. There are 3 or 4 that they're just landlocked, or there's not a whole lot of growth. I mean, if you look at New Windsor, there's only one person I know who owns any land that they could annex, and you might know him too, Matt. And but what I'm getting at is maybe we should, start with the kind of the big dogs, work down,
sure.
and because Union Bridge, they got a great big problem with quarries and water and sewage. That's a big deal for them. So we got to take a look at it and say, all right, I would look at Westminster, Tawnytown, the Mount Airy area. They're so unique over there because they're not sure where they are, whether they're Frederick or whether they're Carroll, but there's a fair amount of Carroll that we need to talk about. And Sykesville, let's look at the larger ones and key in on them, and then give the other ones some chance to give us what their perspective is also, if I make a suggestion.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
So we don't waste a whole lot of time.
It's kind of my opinion, with the amount of ag preservation we have in the county, I would think someone from the county staff should be more involved with the local municipalities, because that's where the growth is gonna happen.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a little bit of disconnect, because like, no one really ever knows what Tawnytown's up to. They're
Well,
always doing a lot.
And Matt, we mentioned that too, that I think that if you bring up ag preservation, which is a baby I want to cherish for a long time, but we need to know what the process is going to be moving forward, so that we're not hopscotching all over the county and maybe put land under easement that should not be put under easement.
Exactly. It
And
needs to
that's
be
what's
more
starting to
strategic.
worry me,
It's got to be
because-
strategic. We can't just be whoever applies.
No,
It's
I'll-
got to be strategic.
I'll take the,
I'm with you.
I'll take just just a quick example, very quick. If you get down 140, one of the flattest, most accessible parcels down 140 is under easement. And why? I mean, I know when I was in here, there was some talk about putting that farm under easement, and I demurred on it. I thought that there's better uses here. And to me, that's a hindrance in what we're talking about right now. Great access, you know, between a secondary road and a major highway, 140, you know, intersections right there. And I'm driving down this road, look at this parcel of land. It's beautifully set there. It's good dirt. I'll agree with that. But should we really think about it? So I said, what are we going to do when we grow up? We're grown up. So we need to take a look at this and say, that farm should never be put under easement because it's going to hinder our plans for this.
That's right.
And
It's gotta be
maybe
thoughtful.
people would say, you never hear me talk like this, but we've got to start looking at this. It is a mature program now. How are we going to finish it off?
The last 10% is the most important, and that's where we are.
You know, we have priority preservation areas, but what are they?
Yep.
We know where they are, but how are they hindering or how are they helping the overall concept of ag preservation? That it's not a hindrance in the future. And that's what's starting to bother me. It bothered me when I was in here, and it's starting to really bother me now.
Now that you're still here,
Why? Okay.
It all comes back around.
I agree with you, Matt, 100%.
Anything else?
we were moving right along until you got here, Janice. What happened?
It's the first part. You got more.
Sorry about that.
That's all.
All right, if we're wrapped up on economic development, I don't need that. Let's move on to the data handbook. A couple things I actually wanted to mention to you before we started into the master plan was just a couple of updates. So over the course of these meetings that we've had, these last several meetings, several questions have come up. We've been looking for some additional information, those sorts of things. I've been making a note of them, and I want to report back what I can. So in terms of the last meeting that we had, you had requested that we have economic development come to speak with you. As I mentioned, I reached out to them. They were unable to come to this meeting, but we are looking at trying to find an upcoming meeting when they can join us and talk some more in depth about economic development. We're looking into some of the questions that you had about tax revenue and the CIP, how well we're adhering to what we've got in our long-range CIP. We don't have that information yet, but we will share that with you when we do. You had a question about, last meeting we were talking about land use and how we've got the county divided up among different land use categories. There was a category that was a little confusing. It was listed as null or blank, I think. And we were able to clarify that most of the properties that come up as null or blank in the state tax assessor's data are things like roadbeds or public, it's infrastructure related. So it's something that wouldn't really, there's not a land use per se on there. So that, just to update you on that. I also wanted to let you know on the meeting prior to that, when we had the presentation on the housing study, there were a few questions about the breaking down the survey responses by age groups or locational groups. And the consultant said that they thought they would be able to do that. I believe they're still working on trying to get that data sorted out. But again, we're trying to we're continuing to put that question in front of them, and we'll share that with you when we have something. I think those are the big things that I had as follow-up items. Can anybody think of anything that I'm missing that you're waiting on? Okay. Let me know if you think of anything. Okay, so would you hit escape, please? Let's see if I've got my presentation up here. There we go. Okay. So I want to share with you the part one of what we're calling a data handbook for the master plan. Gail, did you pass out the binders or no? Okay. This is a big document. Right now, it's at 50-some pages. We have made copies for you, and I can talk about that in just a few minutes. But, well, actually, do you have them with you? The binders? No. Okay. What we're doing here is compiling as much data as we can that might help to answer some of your questions. It's meant to be a reference piece, and we'll provide you with copies of that, as well as copies of all the information related to the master plan that we've been sharing, so that you can bring a binder with you and refer back to it as we go along, because I know we're throwing a ton of information at you. So we're putting together this data handbook as sort of a compendium of all kinds of information, and we wanted to give you just an overview of the first part of that. So part one covers data related to population and households, vital statistics and health, education, and economic development. Part two is in the works and will include data related to transportation, land use and development. We have some farm demographics to share, as well as data related to infrastructure. So what I'm going to do, because this is just voluminous amounts of information, I wanted to try to hit the highlights of some of the charts that we've provided and a few kind of key findings from them. And then I would encourage you to continue to look through that and ask any questions about any of the charts or data that we have. I also, before I start this, want to give a huge shout out to Kathleen Comer from our Comprehensive Planning Bureau, who was the primary compiler of all the data, as well as Carlisle Falat, who is a new planner with us, who worked on some infographics that appear at the front of the data handbook and are what I'm mostly going to be focusing on here. They're kind of meant to make some of this data a little bit more digestible. All right, so if we talk about population first, this information is going to look super familiar because I focused on it last meeting when we talked about the demographics brief. When we're looking at growth and population change over the last 10 years or so, and then also growth projections into the future, what we see is that growth has been slow but steady, and that for the county, and that for the projected future, Carroll is expected to grow a little bit more slowly than other counties in the region between now and 2050. So you can see on the chart at the upper right all the different jurisdictions that we pulled data for, or that were classified as being in our region. And I want to point out a couple of things. Number one, this is all, I would say this is like central Maryland. That's the region we're looking at. It's not necessarily our peer counties when it comes to ag preservation, or when it comes to economic development, or when it comes to housing. Those are different ways to find our peers, but these are just geographically maybe the other counties that are within our orbit here. But I want to call your attention to Queen Anne's County. That is at the bottom of the chart there. They have a fairly similar growth projection trajectory as Carroll County. And in some of the other charts that you'll see, Queen Anne's and Carroll seem to be quite similar in a lot of regards. Not in all, but that is, Queen Anne's obviously is on the eastern shore, and, but it's also considered part of the, in some cases, part of the Baltimore metropolitan region. So that's why Queen Anne shows up here, but just wanted to highlight that out, and maybe you can keep an eye out for that in future charts as we go through here. The other thing we also talked about last meeting about our population was the fact that between 2010 and 2020, the county became slightly more diverse racially. That's all relative, but we did see some changes in the racial characteristics of the county. When it comes to households, the chart on the left shows our use and occupancy permits between 1996 and 2023. So these are permits that are issued when a new dwelling is ready to be occupied. So you can see a big shift in the early 2000s as we were coming out of that building boom in the 90s, really, which is where our, is the genesis of our adequate public facilities ordinance and our concurrency management program, was trying to get a hold on the timing and the phasing of growth so that it could keep pace with the provision of public facilities and services. So then in the mid-2000s, that trailed off, and then we've been averaging, I think, about 360 use and occupancy counties here. Carroll and Queen Anne's are at the bottom of that chart in the right-hand corner. And you can see that Carroll has the second highest percentage of single-family detached houses in the region. So that's upwards of 80%, whereas some of our neighboring counties have a different mix. We also have significantly lower percentages of townhomes and structures that have 10+ units in them. Just a reporting of that data for what it's worth and for what it is in terms of our future conversations. But you can see where some of the different types of housing units shake out in terms of the whole central Maryland, lower Pennsylvania region.
Daphne, that is the county overall, which includes the municipalities?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
All right, we also wanted to compile information related to vital statistics and health in the county, because even though so much of the master plan discussions focus on land use and economic development, housing, those kinds of things, it's important to understand as well what kind of metrics play into the health of our communities, and perhaps where some of the needs may be for providing the necessary services and facilities that will help create healthy communities. So we have a couple of data points here that are worth pointing out. Number one, Carroll County has among the lowest poverty rates in the region. So as of 2022, that was at 5.1%. We also, however, had the third highest death rate per 100,000 people in the region between 2014 and 2021. The top two causes of death in both 2014 individually and 2021 individually were heart disease and cancer. And then the last, that map graphic there was one that sort of took me by surprise. But this was deaths by suicide, which per 100,000 people. So this is not total numbers. It's all relative to that 100,000 benchmark. Deaths by suicide were higher than surrounding counties in 2021. And the graphic there at the bottom that's helping me navigate these slides is covering up the numbers. Actually, I wonder if I can, let me see if I can, there we go. 12 to 14 suicides per 100,000 for Carroll, Harford, and Anne Arundel. So definitely some things that we could dig a little bit more into, but important to understand where our residents, the people that we're planning for, are in terms of some of these vital statistics and health.
So
Good question.
do they have ages for
Thank
the
you.
death?
Way to be. Or what's the average age of our
Right.
population?
Thank you for asking that. I have a little bit of information, but we may have to get some additional, because I had to understand this as well. Bear with me for just a minute.
That's okay.
Okay, so these are, okay, I don't have the age, the specific ages, but these statistics are age-adjusted death rates. And I had to figure out what that meant. So I did do the digging on that. So what age-adjusted means is, let's see. Okay. I don't have it in, oh, I know where it was written down. So basically what age-adjusted is that it takes out the natural, what you would naturally have as a mortality rate
Right.
in any.
87.
Yeah.
How far, what's the,
So there is a
Differential.
natural rate for even like teenagers is gonna have a natural
okay.
mortality rate. So this takes out those natural causes of death.
So
To come up with-
2021 was COVID.
right.
So you would kind of expect that, and despite the numbers that we saw, especially with the elderly, if they went to the hospital, no matter what they came in with, and a lot of them had heart issues,
Right.
strokes, if they got COVID while they were there, it was automatic calls for COVID, so, but
Yeah, there is definitely some more we could do to dig into some of these numbers and even some of the other causes for death. For instance, are our rates of certain diseases higher than other places?
I
That kind
guess
of-
for our purposes, and I don't know, there's discussions with the hospital, Carroll County, and and others about, you see a lot and you read a lot about mental health issues. And I guess they perceive mental health issue as one of their critical tasks, on their critical timeline. So in terms of planning for us, to help assist them achieve that goal, that would make sense to have that as part of our plan. I'm stretching here, but I'm just, if you put it together,
Yeah.
if that's their goal, then we can help them get to that goal, or facilitate land use or zoning for those types of goals that they have.
Right.
So mental health is a thing. I think just taking this, taking that data and kind of for projecting into how we can apply it to planning and zoning, that to me seems to be a possible
Yeah.
attack, a way to attack it.
Out of curiosity, where did the suicide information come from? I'm by no means questioning it. I'm curious for
Sure.
another reason, which I'll share in a minute.
It looks like Maryland Department of Health Vital Statistics Administration Division of Health Statistics.
So, just for everybody's knowledge up here on this, with this group, I guess it was at least 2, maybe 3 Board of Health meetings ago that we had with the Health Department. I asked about this question because when I served on the board of the Boys and Girls Club and we were looking to do the expansion and we were looking at mental health, Carroll County was noted as having the highest suicide rate amongst not only people in the county, but also kids. And at the time, we had Delegate Krebs was on that board with, well, not the board, but the committee with me. We were doing the expansion project. And I was always curious as, what's the cause for that? Is there something specific, where areas of the state are we seeing this, and, the why? Fast forward to, I guess it was about 2 meetings ago with the Health Department, and they had told us that there was a technical error in how the numbers were calculated and that was not accurate. Now, I never got a complete answer to that question. And the only reason I'm asking you is I'm fascinated that this is exactly what I had already been made aware of, and maybe it's not completely germane to this evening, but I'm just intrigued by that. And I'm by no means discounting, because I actually believe this to be accurate. One other quick question. So we have the poverty level. And obviously, this is a little trickier to look at, but do we have any sort of indication statistically as to where it puts those that would be above the federal poverty level but would be considered ALICE, which is asset-limited households, so people just barely making enough? So then the question is, your car, you have a car issue. Do you fix your car? Do you buy groceries that week? It's a very interesting situation to look at, because typically everybody's just looking at poverty level. And you're contending with a lot of people and communities that fall into that category, and it's from everything to everybody. I mean, we had a meeting last year, a number of us attended at Exploration Commons, and we met and discussed the whole ALICE issue in Carroll County, and it's something that really, when we went through all the different simulations, it really opened your eyes to it, because we were given examples. You're a family of 4, here's how much money you have this month, here's the issues you're contending with. So that also would play into statistically how we're looking at some of those. If there's any way to qualify that, I don't know.
Yeah, we can see what
Okay.
sort of data we can pull related to that.
Because I have a funny feeling there's more, based off the meeting we had over at Exploration Commons, I have a feeling it's a lot bigger percentage of our population if we look at that plus the poverty level. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And just one thing that I want to put out there for future consideration, I think Mr. Kane noted the different ways that we could potentially be helping in terms of support for land uses, for healthcare facilities, that kind of thing. There's a lot of conversation these days in the planning world about mental health and how planning can positively affect it. And I think it does. We're so focused on land use, and we should be. That's a very easy area of control that we have. But even things like, are we giving consideration to the types of spaces where people can form connections and those bonding moments that positively impact mental health and your ability to kind of overcome different struggles? Are we creating the types of, are we providing the types of spaces where people can recreate and be outside in nature and achieve those kinds of positive mental benefits from those types of activities? So it's a lot of different factors that I think can support a goal of improving mental health, in addition to strictly access to mental health support services, that kinds of thing. All right. The next section of the data handbook covers education. There's not a ton of data in here that seemed earth-shattering to me, but for what it's worth, our K through 12 school enrollment is projected to increase, but fairly modestly, and still numerically speaking, remain one of the lowest in the region. But I think on this chart, there aren't a whole lot of jurisdictions that look significantly different from Carroll. It's just the numbers that we're talking about, which is affected by differences in population. The one thing that I think is important to point out here is on the educational attainment. For Carroll, the educational attainment is high, and I think it's comparable to most of the counties in the region. The two outliers are Howard County and Montgomery County, where you see a much higher percentage of people who have bachelor's degrees or graduate or professional degrees. But I think Carroll is comparable to most of the other jurisdictions in the region from an educational attainment standpoint. And then lastly, economic development. We have a fairly low unemployment rate, but when we look at projected new jobs by decade, Carroll is much lower than surrounding counties in the region. And this kind of connects back to the discussion we were just having about economic development. It's easy to look at these charts and say, oh my gosh, Carroll is so much less than other jurisdictions, but all of the things that you guys were just talking about in terms of, well, we don't have the same infrastructure, we don't have the same draw for tech companies or what have you, that's going to influence the number of jobs that we're able to attract here. And there's no sense in comparing ourselves to jurisdictions that are on, you know, major interstate highways or what have you. But you do see that this is projected new jobs by decade, and each of the next several decades, we are projected to add about 3,000 new jobs per decade. And then on the Carroll County jobs by industry chart here, this is in 2021. The top industries that were providing jobs in the county included the healthcare and social assistance, government, which includes both federal, state, and local government, retail, trade, and construction. Those were the top four industries providing jobs in the county in 2021. There is a ton more data in the data handbook, part 1, and there will be more coming in part 2. But I just wanted to give you a few sort of key findings and highlights from this information. Mostly I want to encourage you to flip through it and just know what's available. You don't have to know the data, but know what's available, so that as we're going through these discussions, if you're looking for data on population or data on households or whatever, you know that we've got a fair number of charts in this handbook that you could reference. And if we don't have the information, we can try to get it for you. So with that, we'll end with the same slide we've been ending, with just a couple of questions about what information or data stood out to you, and whether there are any tentative recommendations that you want us to put in a parking lot for future consideration.
Where do we start? I had some thoughts when I was reading through some of the charts and data and all that stuff. You know, our population's aging. The healthcare need, I'm just writing these things down, brainstorming kind of thing. Population's aging, increased need for healthcare. Healthcare is one of our top employers, probably going to continue to be a growing area of employment. The employment, I'm writing this stuff down while fast and furious. Employment within or from outside the county. Most of our county residents leave the county to go work someplace else. Is this an opportunity for us to keep them in the county, the healthcare? Thought about the meeting, Daphne, that you and I attended with Carroll County Hospital and their emergency room expansion. And I was talking to the vice president of the nursing, vice president of nursing. That's not her title, but that she oversaw the nurses and hiring and recruiting and the whole shebang. They partnered with, they have a co-op with the Philippines, and the folks that come here are excellent candidates, but they have trouble living here because it's expensive. Gets into the housing affordability thing. So I'm on this healthcare track. So the nurses that come over from the Philippines have to cohabitate to be able to afford to live. So the hospital serves 7 in 10 residents in the county. 70% of the county goes to that place right up the street here. That blew me away. One of the things the chairman said was that staggering number, and they measure, it's a business. It's like, how fast can you get your hamburger at the drive-through at McDonald's? I mean, I don't want to compare them to a drive-through. I mean, it's much more serious than that, but they measure everything. And they're middle of the road, sometimes a little less than middle of the road when comparing to the other 32 or 33 regional hospitals in the state. And they want to do better. And that's why they were having this emergency room redo, because they have the mental health section in the emergency room, and people, it's all discombobulated and messed up, and that's what they're trying to fix. But they said 20% of their patients, of their business, could be handled elsewhere at these, and I don't know what they're called, but the urgent care. Thank you. 20% or a little bit more could be handled outside of the hospital. The visits to the hospital, they don't need to be at the hospital. They could go to an urgent care center. So how do we get with the hospital and help them with their plan, or come up with a plan, land use, areas, where do these need to be? Obviously population centers and things like that. But along main arteries, along, those kinds of things. What kind of land use, what kind of zoning does that require? And there's employment, there's growth, there's solution for the hospital, there's solution for the county population. There's a bunch of good things there. how do we partnership? They have a partnership with Carroll Community College. They were happy with their numbers. I didn't get into it with them about their turnover in their nursing staff. But they were happy that with their numbers, I think they said they were getting 15 to 20 of their nurses from Carroll Community College. And they were happy with that, you know. Of course, they always think they can do better, but how, they didn't mention anything about McDaniel.
Well, that just started.
Just started.
Yeah.
I did see that,
Yeah.
yeah, it just started. There's University of Maryland School of Nursing, like one of the tops in the nation. They're not here.
Yeah, they want to go to shock trauma.
Johns Hopkins just got $1 billion from
Michael Bloomberg.
Bloomberg. They're not here. Campus life, rural, beautiful. Think of Penn State, think of other places like that. Penn State's in the middle of nowhere. That's it. But that's what makes that place thrive, and everything around it revolves around that. Are the conversations with the University of Maryland or Hopkins to leave the city and come out to a rural area and have a learning environment, you know, along some main artery out here? I don't know. But anyway, that's what I'm thinking. So on this healthcare thing, and I think that's a real opportunity or a parking lot for future consideration for us.
Thank you.
If I might, real quick, and I'm curious, based off the numbers you mentioned, so you've got 20% that could go to, should be going technically to urgent care. I guess my question would be, why aren't they?
There aren't enough.
There aren't enough urgent cares, or they're choosing to go to the hospital?
They're choosing to go to the hospital because there aren't enough urgent cares. They don't have enough in the locations where they need them.
Well, I think there are quite a few. What they don't have is very few have extended hours. So
Okay.
that creates people saying,
Well,
I've got to
there's-
go to the hospital.
There's quite a few, but they're within 3 miles of hospital here. in
Yes,
West
Yeah.
Boston.
yes,
I
you've
mean,
got
they're-
the one on 140
I mean, the
that's,
one's
yeah.
a mile away.
So the hospital's easier to go to.
Several are affiliated with the hospital. If you go there, your records automatically
And I don't-
transfer.
They
So-
also mentioned that they service quite a few of their patients are from Pennsylvania. Quite a few.
I'd be curious too, and of course, there's probably no easy way we can't qualify this, but, you know, what percentage of that 20% are people that just go, well, I've got a health issue, I'm going to the hospital?
Yeah, it's an information.
You know, it's sort of like, and I'm not being critical of anybody, but you have people that immediately have a health problem, I'm calling the ambulance.
Right.
So then, I mean, you probably are definitely onto something without question. There should be more availability from an urgent care perspective, but I gotta wonder, you know, what percentage has that mindset that they're
It's
just going
informational,
straight-
educational,
Yes.
it's a lot of
It
different
is.
things.
It's a lot of pieces, maybe.
Marketing, it's all kinds of stuff.
I don't know.
And a question for that too would be, how many people are either uninsured or underinsured?
I think there
Good
you
point.
Because the hospital can't turn anybody away.
There you are.
Good point.
Yeah, that's,
Which gets back to what you were talking about a few minutes ago.
I mean, 'cause I know with my health insurance, we have good health insurance, there's, the copay at the hospital is different than the copay in going to an urgent care. I mean, out of pocket, it's cheaper up front to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
I don't want to make light of the situation, but, you know, you said the spike in deaths was caused to COVID. I think it could be directly related to the fact that we passed clustered housing in our county. I think that's what caused it.
Yeah, Pete and I didn't like the cluster thing, the density thing.
Okay.
Anthony, I think one of the most positive statistics that I looked at is the per capita household income in
Strong.
Carroll County. And, I mean, we're really holding our own here. Matter of fact, we're really close to better than medium and above. And when you look at the surrounding counties and where we stand, we have a pretty strong base here, which is amazing. I can't say I'm surprised, But I think we're in a real strong position here as far as the per capita and the mean household the median household income and the mean.
But-
That's pretty good. They're pretty good statistics.
That may also play into the, if you think about it, you know, with a lot of people, you make all that money in the rat race, and that's where you want to be, and you live in Carroll County because you want to get away from that, which becomes counterintuitive to, we want to grow, but everybody who lives here, it's like, wait a second, I moved
I'll move
here
here for
because
that.
I work in that, I don't want to live in that.
Yeah,
So-
and that drives home the point, you know, it's easy to sit here and say, you know, things are broken and we gotta fix this, this, and this. The truth is we got a lot of really good things going on, and, you know, how do we perpetuate that, right? How do we not mess it up? And, yeah, again, you know, the schools are, we can hit on the things that are working and accentuate that. And again, how do we amplify that and continue that success without messing it up? Because again, you know, as dour as you know, I bring it up too much. Clustering is not the end of the world. It's not messing up my community to the point that, you know, I want to move. It's not. My community's not broken. It's not. And so as much as we can sit up here and say, you know, this and this and this are wrong, we got a lot of good things going on too. So I think it's important.
And people do come to Carroll County for different things. I mean, if
Yeah.
you look at the wine festival and the different things that are going on out at the farm museum, and people come from everywhere, which goes back then to something that you brought up, Tom, and that is, how can we keep them here another night or two? And we can't. That's really a strong thing. I think about that a lot. I mean, people drive a long way to get here, and then they drive a long way to go home or to stay somewhere else.
Yep.
We need to keep them here.
Well, I mean, the problem with hotels is occupancy rate.
Yes.
Right.
And without having
Some-
things that are,
all the
people are gonna
time.
do all the time,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
hard to build them.
Yeah, and that
'Cause I'll
that
tell-
business travel, the Monday through Thursday,
Right.
it's important.
I think
you know,
I
and if
better
you-
look
if-
into bed and breakfast here.
It's one thing to be occupied Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday
Yeah, but
night.
it's just like being a farmer, you gotta work on the weekend then all the time, that's the
Well,
problem.
I do anyhow, so.
I'll tell you the funniest thing is, you know, there's a large farm between Indianapolis and Chicago on 79, I think, it's Fair Oaks Farm, the guy that came up with the Fairlife idea.
Oh, yeah.
And they milk a lot of cows in that area. They had their own intersection put in on the highway there, because they bought, I don't know, they own 25,000 acres there now or so. He's got a hotel there on site, because he's got the agritourism. He's got restaurant, you know, farm-to-table restaurant. And then they do this agritourism where you can get in the bus and go out and ride through the barn and all this other stuff.
That's right.
He says that hotel has the highest occupancy rate of any Hampton. I think it's not a Hampton, it's one in their chain though. He says they're getting ready to build another one,
That's great.
but it's right on the interstate.
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking about doing?
Don't you want to do that?
Is there money in agritourism?
If it doesn't get too many people in it, that's the thing. It's like everything else. If there's too many of something, and we've had those ups and downs. We had that, I guess it was in the 60s, there was a push to put greenhouses everywhere. And if you really look hard and drive around through Carroll County, you see a lot of old greenhouses. Oops. So, you know, everything has a balance. And, by
You
the way,
definitely
that-
have a need for some,
Yeah.
I just don't know how many. And it's not a huge moneymaker, because once again, it's mostly a weekend type
Right,
event center.
right.
But it brings people to the county, which
Right.
then they spend other money while they're
Exactly.
here.
Right.
Which it'd be
they
nice.
can
if-
stay in the
it'd be
hotel.
nice if they had a place, nice
Yeah,
hotel to
hotel.
stay at. Yeah.
I love data. Thank you, Daphne. It's all
Yes,
good.
thank you.
Who bought all my cows?
So, our next meeting is the 17th.
Morning.
We will also have some more master plan stuff to share with you, probably not the part 2 of the handbook. But just to let you know, we, on the 17th, we want to talk to you about the formation of some work groups that will help to dig into things like the economic development and land use study that Drew talked about, the housing study. We're also looking at forming a work group dedicated to all things agriculture. So, but those are groups that, by your procedures and rules, you're able to create as advisory groups by resolution. So we'll talk to you on the 17th about what those could look like. I'd like to, you can have 2 planning commission members sit on an advisory group. So think about which, if any of those, you might want to be part of, be embedded in, so to speak, which will help draw the connection between the work of that advisory group and you as the planning commission body. I just wanted to plant that seed for you because we'll talk about that on the 17th. Okay?
All right. Anything else on this? Okay. Great information.